There's nothing worse than dying multiple times in a game, whether it's to a grueling boss, a tricky platforming section, or simply a wave of enemies that just seem to be a little too fast or strong for their own good. It's a surefire way to make any player, no matter how much prior experience they've had with difficult games, annoyed and frustrated. Most developers know this feeling well and will make sure to never patronize or provoke the player after they meet their demise several times. In fact, for some games such as Dark Souls or Elden Ring, death is even a core mechanic of the game that is seen as necessary in order to grow stronger. But on the other hand, there are some games that will take the opposite approach and laugh at the player while they are down. While this could be seen as a form of motivation in itself, it's definitely a surreal experience when a game recognizes that the player is doing badly and decides to humiliate them for it. And believe it or not, there are actually plenty of games that take this approach. Number 5. Ninja Gaiden Black. Similar to most of the other games in this beloved hack-and-slash series, Ninja Gaiden Black is an incredibly challenging game that will punish the player severely if they mess up their inputs and underestimate their opponents. But there is actually a secret way to make the game much easier, and that is by activating Ninja Dog Mode. If players manage to die 3 times in the very first chapter of the game, they will be asked, "Do you choose to abandon the way of the ninja?" And if they answer yes to the prompt, then all the enemies will be much weaker, and Ryu will deal a ton more damage than he did before, making for a difficulty change that perfectly suits those players who can't handle the challenge presented in the real game. Number 4. Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. Acquiring the chicken hat in Metal Gear Solid 5 is very easy, but there's no denying that it's a piece of clothing that instantly makes the otherwise stoic and badass Big Boss look more like a clown who has accidentally found himself in the middle of a battlefield. Upon dying 3 times in a row, the game will politely ask the player if they would like to wear the chicken hat, which actually hides Boss from enemy vision 3 times until the trick stops working. While it's certainly tempting to use this clearly overpowered item, especially on those trickier sneaking missions that are littered with guards, it will restrict the final grade of the mission to an A rating or lower, so it can be best to avoid it, not only because of this, but also because it looks absolutely ridiculous on top of the boss's head. Number 3. Nightshade. The classic NES title. Nightshade has an extremely unique death mechanic that is so punishing that it hasn't really been seen in any game since, which is probably for the best considering it can literally block the player from progressing any further in the game. Rather than reloading at a checkpoint when he dies, Nightshade will instead be transported to a death trap room where he must solve a puzzle to escape back into Metro City. But while each of the first 4 rooms has some sort of riddle that can be figured out, by the time Nightshade has died a 5th time, he will be placed in a room without a solution, meaning the player will need to restart the entire game as punishment for making a few small mistakes. Number 2. Middle-earth. Shadow of War. The Nemesis system is what drives a lot of the gameplay in Shadow of War, with the whole mechanic revolving around the player's interactions with the menacing orcs that patrol Middle-earth. After the player defeats an orc, they have a chance of returning for vengeance with the scars left on their body from their last encounter. But these encounters actually have a huge impact on the orc hierarchy too. If players keep dying to a particular orc who they just can't seem to overcome, that orc will advance up the social ladder, becoming praised by his peers and earning Sauron's respect. Alongside watching the orc rise through the ranks, at the player's expense, they will also humiliate Talion to his face upon seeing him again, sometimes even begging him to kill them in an attempt to mock the ranger and his abilities. Number 1. Sifu. Sifu doesn't exactly hold the player's hand before throwing them into some intense close combat encounters, and while dying once or twice in this brutally challenging beat-em-up isn't too much of a problem, dying over and over again can become very embarrassing and can make the game so much harder going forward. The reason for this is that the unnamed protagonist will age each time he dies, which not only changes his physical appearance but also restricts him from unlocking certain abilities which can only be acquired at younger ages. Players will begin the game at age 20, so staying as close to this number as possible is the primary aim in this fantastic beat-em-up. But if the player does keep dying, they can be sure the game will remind them of it.